Good morning. It's Friday, August 29th. The multi-front war in the Middle East is now 693 days old. I'm your host, Jonathan Schanzer. Welcome back yet again to the FDD Morning Brief. Some big sighs of relief out of Israel this morning and some sadness as the remains of two hostages have been recovered by IDF forces. The press has named one of them. Ilan Weiss was killed by Hamas while trying to fend off the assault on Kibbutz Be'eri. The identity of the other hostage has not yet been identified. In other news, I have no earthly idea what the Israelis were doing in Syria the other day. Israeli aircraft bombed a specific site, which was once home to a Syrian military base. After the airstrike, Israeli forces went in on the ground, an exceptional operation. They located and confiscated what they described as, quote, secret and sensitive equipment, end quote. My context can't or won't say much about what happened there, but it appears that the equipment may have belonged to, wait for it, the Turks. And whatever it was, the Israelis clearly weren't willing to tolerate it. Watch this space, folks, because this doesn't look like normalization to me between Israel and Syria. It looks like a pretty fierce struggle between Turkey and Israel for the future of this embattled country. Our guest today is Jacob Bame, Chief Executive Officer of ICC. That's the Israel on Campus Coalition, not the International Criminal Court. ICC works to empower Jewish and Zionist students on college and university campuses across the country. This is important stuff right now, especially in the post-October 7th world. We're going to hear about Jacob's work and his priorities for the new school year. That's coming up in a few minutes, so stick around. Lots of things went boom yesterday in Yemen. The Houthis took a pretty serious beating from the Israelis, and man, did they have it coming. The Houthis inserted themselves back into this conflict in November of 2023, a month after October 7th. Ever since, they've been firing drones and rockets at Israel from 1,000 miles away. Nearly 2 years later, the Israelis have finally started to take out Houthi leaders. It's about time. According to reports, senior Houthi officials gathered at multiple sites across the capital of Sana'a. Israeli intelligence assessed they had congregated to watch a speech by Houthi leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi. Cue the booms. The IDF conducted simultaneous strikes on multiple sites. One local said it felt like an earthquake had rocked Sana'a. For now, it looks like the Israeli strikes eliminated the Houthi defense minister, the military chief of staff, and the prime minister. But don't pop the champagne, folks. These targeted strikes will set back the Houthis, but the group will likely be just fine so long as Abdul Malik al-Houthi remains the big cheese. I'm waiting for the Israelis to take him out. Doing so will essentially have the same effect as the elimination of Hassan Nasrallah last fall. That was a gut punch to Hezbollah in Lebanon, and it's one they still haven't recovered from. Keep an eye on all this, folks. After having to collect intelligence from nothing, the Israelis now have a beat on the Houthi leaders, and that is a sign of more strikes to come. Now for your headlines. Headline one, it's official. France, Britain, and Germany are planning to reimpose sanctions on Iran. Yesterday morning, the European trio, otherwise known as the E3, sent a letter to the UN Security Council declaring their intention to snap back sanctions. Oh, snap. That means that all of the UN Security Council sanctions that were lifted under that deeply flawed, horrendous, and otherwise terrible 2015 Iran nuclear deal are coming back into force. Huzzah. The sanctions won't take effect for 30 days, which is the thing I don't like. The E3 has left the door open to negotiations with Iran, which could potentially stop the snapback mechanism in its tracks. As for Iran, the regime said the decision to trigger snapback sanctions will undermine its cooperation with the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA. Ooh, that's scary, as if Iran was cooperating with the nuclear watchdog in the first place. A quick shout out here to my colleagues at FDD. The Iran team has been pushing for this outcome, these snapback sanctions, to return for years. Headline two, UNIFIL's days are officially numbered, and I am tickled pink. Yesterday, the UN Security Council voted to extend UNIFIL's mandate just one last time. To get everyone up to speed, UNIFIL is the purported UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon. It was created in 1978 to, well, keep the peace. They were supposed to prevent Hezbollah from establishing a foothold in Lebanon, which would be hilarious if it wasn't so infuriating. If you know anything about Lebanon, you know that UNIFIL has failed miserably. So no, I'm not sad to see this sorry excuse for a UN agency go. But the celebrations will have to wait until New Year's Day 2027 because UNIFIL will remain operational until December 31st, 2026. This was actually a compromise with the United States. Apparently, this clown car is going to take a while to pack up before it leaves. Headline 3, Israeli officials issued an arrest warrant for an American who is lobbying for Qatar in the country. So yes, the scandal known as Qatargate continues in Israel, and it looks like it's only heating up. I, for one, think that's a good thing. I remind you here that we had one here in the United States. It killed the career of Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. The Europeans had a Qatargate too. That one rocked European Parliament. Oh, and don't forget the scandal over there at FIFA, the governing body of the World Cup. The Qataris were busted for bribing officials there too. Okay, so where am I going with all this? Obviously, Israel is going to have to wake up and smell the hummus already. The idea of trusting this dirtbag regime in Doha to negotiate for the lives of remaining hostages while they're bribing people left and right and supporting Hamas and Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, all of it is just downright bonkers. But there's a bigger question here. How long till the world wakes up to the fact that this is a terror-supporting mafia family with a seat at the UN? All right, with that, it's time for my conversation with Jacob Bame, CEO of the ICC, not the International Criminal Court. Let's bring him on the program. Welcome to the FDD Morning Brief, Jacob Bame.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. Great to be back.
All right, you're a repeat offender. Thanks for coming back for more abuse. So I'm going to ask you to start us off with good news. That's not usually what we do here, but I think it's important. I understand that there are several campuses that have taken corrective action since the encampments first broke out in the fall of 23. The campuses, the administrations took charge when it came to anti-Israel protests. So there are a couple, right? Tell us who they are.
Yeah, well, there are some schools that have done a really, really good job from day one because they took a different approach. So you think about schools like Dartmouth College, you think about places like Tulane, places like Vanderbilt, where even though there were tremendous challenges, university administrators were adults, they exercised moral leadership, they exercised actual leadership, and stood athwart some of this a really nasty activism we saw across the country. One of the places that has done it the best is the state schools in Florida. And I think there was an Atlantic article that I saw today or yesterday sort of highlighting this shift. You're starting to see a migration of Jewish and pro-Israel students from schools like the Ivy League schools, where they used to sort of focus on and where there are huge Jewish communities, to schools in the South, to schools in the Southeast, where there's been a different approach. And then at a place like Columbia University, we're seeing some encouraging signs where there's an agreement with the government that seems to have some very constructive features, and we're going to have to see how that gets implemented. The proof is going to be in the pudding, I think, in the days ahead.
Definitely. All right, so we got some positives. Now give us the negative side of the ledger. I mean, which schools need a proper spanking?
Well, look, I mean, from coast to coast, these challenges are continuing. And I think, to step back a bit, one of the most important points to emphasize is that this is not just happening. This is not some sort of grassroots movement that is bottom up. There are highly professionalized actors led by American Muslims for Palestine. They've got their annual convention for Palestine in Chicago, where they bring thousands of activists together. And the only ancillary track every year is the campus activism track, where they are teaching undergrads to introduce divestment resolutions, to take over their student governments, to take over other leadership roles on campus, and to marginalize and exclude Jewish and pro-Israel students. And so schools from coast to coast are being targeted in that fashion. And the prior academic year, we actually saw, over the course of the academic year, 77 of these campaigns. And there was no pattern to where they showed up. They showed up at small schools, at large schools, at state schools, at private schools. And 77 of these campaigns asked either student governments or increasingly actually asked boards of trustees and boards of regents themselves to divest from Israel, because they believe this is, number one, an effective propaganda platform. But the second part I mentioned, that was unprecedented. That was totally unprecedented, that 31 of those 77 campaigns directly targeted trustees or regents who, unlike the student government, actually have the power to divest, actually have the power to implement it. And the amazing thing that happened is that we and our students and our coalition partners activated all of our organizing tools, and not a single one of those 31 campaigns succeeded. So that's going to be important on all of these schools from coast to coast. We're probably going to see a whole lot more campaigns this fall and the following spring. And we need university administrators, university leaders, including at that trustee and regent level, to be prepared to stand up for what's right.
That's really interesting about the regents and trustees. I mean, I think we've seen a couple of specific examples of this where I understand, they've tried to kind of dox the top donors to the schools, the kind of pro-Israel donors to the schools. So we've seen that in a number of schools. But yeah, I guess maybe to push back a little bit to try to get you to answer, specifically, are there campuses that you're particularly concerned about in terms of the administrators, in terms of the way that things have gone over the last, almost 2 years now? Are there a couple that you've got an eye on that you think could really blow up this fall?
I think it's all going to be about how they respond to what happens. We know that our adversaries are going to present us with, some very, very significant challenges on all sorts of campuses, and we're going to have to see how the university leadership responds. What I will say, though, without getting into specifics, they all are on notice from coast to coast. Something has shifted. Something has shifted in the regulatory environment. Something has shifted in the social environment, and I don't think that university leaders can turn a blind eye to this sort of professional anti-Semitism that's coming to their campuses cost-free anymore.
All right, well, let's hope. Some schools are, in fact, already back in session. Have you seen anything so far? Is there activity that's giving you a hint of what may be coming?
Yeah, so it's just getting started. A number of schools are in session. Most of them are going to come in next week after Labor Day, but we are seeing a few things already. One thing to note is that this is a freshman class coming in right now that is super primed for activism around these issues. One of the interesting pieces is that in the spring, before the semester ended, we ran our last opinion poll of undergraduate students, and we asked them, what are the issues you're most focused on? Open, they can answer any issue. Number one, the issue they identified was economy and cost of living. Makes sense. Number two was Israel-Gaza. So these are people who were juniors in high school when the war began. They know and have heard a lot about this, and so that's both positive in the sense that on the pro-Israel side, we have activists primed for activism, but also going to be a tremendous challenge when it comes to Israel's detractors. The second thing that I think we're going to see is what I'm calling humanitarian Trojan horses. I'm expecting student government resolutions now that are cloaked in language around these false, exaggerated notions of famine and human rights abuses that Israel's responsible for in Gaza. And so I think that we'll see some campaigns on campuses that are framed as kind of neutral acts of compassion, but they're actually going to be Trojan horses meant to marginalize pro-Israel students. The third trend is the co-opting of the immigration issue. We know that Israel's detractors are already trying to link the U.S. immigration enforcement battles and the administration's big immigration enforcement push with the Israel issue and to embed anti-Israel rhetoric into a broader sort of like border justice push. So that's one thing we're seeing. And then the final two pieces to watch are, number one, with a number of university leaders stepping up and kicking their Students for Justice in Palestine groups off campus. That's sort of like, the prime group organizing these anti-Israel and anti-Semitic campaigns on campus. We may see some increased radicalization as a number of these groups go more fully into the community and out of the control and influence of university leaders. And finally, after October 7th, in the immediate wake of October 7th, we saw a lot of strength and a lot of unity in the American Jewish and pro-Israel communities. And I'm starting to feel a little bit of that erode over both domestic political issues here in the United States and over some domestic political issues in Israel. So I think it's really important that we maintain a bipartisan movement, that we work with people of all backgrounds, of all beliefs. And so that's something else that we're going to be really focused on in the year ahead.
Interesting, really interesting trends all around. I think that exhaustion, though, that looms large. You get a sense that there's exhaustion in Israel, but there's exhaustion here. there's I think exhaustion worldwide for this war. The thing that you just said about high school students that were juniors coming in, that fascinates me. You know, and I think maybe the reason why is, and we've been looking at this at FDD's program on education and national security, that we are seeing that there's penetration of this stuff in K through 12.
Yep.
So these kids are getting primed before they get to college, right? And there's a battle for hearts and minds at a really young age now.
Oh yeah, and they're being primed by the TikTok algorithm at an even younger age, and so it's an enormous challenge.
Yeah. All right. So you mentioned AMP, SJP. You know, we've been tracking those. I've been tracking those guys for 11 years now. Who are the major players in this world of Hamas protests? I mean, so SJP, I think that's a big one. Obviously, there's a splinter group called Within Our Lifetime. We've watched that one engage across the country. At one point, we saw a lot of Sami Dune, but then it was designated by the U.S. government. It was based in Canada. It was actually considered a foreign terrorist organization for its connections with the PFLP. Are there others that you're tracking right now? New groups that are emerging? Are there different names that are going to pop up this year?
Students for Justice in Palestine continues to be the primary group, backed by a whole coalition of organizations. Just like we've got a coalition supporting students on our side, they do as well. American Muslims for Palestine, as you well know, leads the pack. They're kind of the primary guiding hand, but there is a whole network of hyper collaborative organizations supporting students. The primary brand continues to be that SJP brand. Sometimes they will layer on top of it a fig leaf that they call Jewish Voice for Peace, which is really nothing more than a brand to try to gain some credibility. It's neither Jewish nor a voice for peace. But anyways, yeah, those continue to be the primary groups. I would say that, you know, on some campuses, there's a growing element of SDS, Students for Democratic Society, which has seen a renaissance that's gotten involved in some of these issues, but continues to be led by Students for Justice in Palestine. And where they're at their strongest, they're building coalitions around these issues. They try to expand the BDS, you know, boycott, divestment, sanctions issue platform to include the whole panoply of progressive issues du jour. It's part of what I was alluding to before.
Yeah, that sort of intersectionality of sorts that they've been building on for many years. JVP, you mentioned, that's an interesting one. There was, of course, that somewhat famous tweet now from, I guess it was early 23, where the founder and chairman of AMP tweeted something out apparently as a draft, or maybe even he intended to have it come out under the X handle of JVP, but instead errantly shot that tweet off, and it may have exposed him. Do you get a sense of the? Do you understand that leadership structure over there at JVP?
Yes, it's they're hyper coordinated. They're when anti-Israel activists are organizing something like a divestment campaign on a campus, they'll put together a whole coalition that includes Jewish Voice for Peace. It includes any anti-Israel groups in the local community that want to contribute to the effort. It'll include SJP. It'll include whoever the key actors are in that space. I continue to believe that this is principally a political fight, not principally an educational challenge or a community relations challenge. And that's exactly what I mean by that. Our adversaries are putting political organizers onto the ground. And for them, it's a unified battle space. So the exact same organizers who will bring divestment to the University of Vermont one week will literally a week later bring the same language to the Burlington, Vermont City Council. So they're sophisticated in that sense. They approach it as a modern, unified battle space. And as you've been talking about since at least the 2021 war in Gaza, Jonathan, probably before, the war in the information space continues to dominate. It continues to be so important. And so the fact that you're having this problem with like woke right podcasts, like that fundamentally influences the experience that every single pro-Israel and Jewish student has on a college campus every day, because that's where everyone's living. That's what's in the ether. So we've got to take the information, the war in the information space, extremely seriously. And I think that our organizations do that, and others in our coalition have. But for me, like, that is a fundamental component of any serious strategy to empower the Jewish and pro-Israel students on campus.
Yeah, it's getting more and more complicated with, you know, Tucker Carlson and others out there, parroting some of the stuff that's being voiced in the pro-Hamas protest movements. It's actually scary.
No, you talk to the students, and the students, mostly just want to go to school, but a lot of them now, a growing number of them, have this kind of passion for activism around the issue, but they feel that they're caught in a pincer between left and right. And it feels like it's not even just like the far left and the far right anymore. It's like growing towards the center a little bit. So
they're not alone, right? I mean, I think we all sort of feel that way. Centrists out there are definitely feeling that pinch, and I am not surprised to hear that students are feeling that way. If they haven't quite figured out where they belong on the political spectrum, which of course is just it's a moving target anyway. I think maybe related to this, and maybe my last question here before I let you go, how are the students coping? I mean, we're 2 years into this. We were talking before about the exhaustion and the information war, and just it's cognitive combat for the brains of these kids. And for them to kind of stand in the trenches when it's not what they signed up for, right? I mean, these people probably just wanted to go to school to drink, get I don't know, maybe an education, meet a partner that they, want to spend some time with, have some fun. I mean, what are you and your colleagues doing to help with the exhaustion and it's just got to be a withering psychological environment.
Well, for one thing, I do think there's something to be said for spending your life in a worthy cause. And there's something about this moment, the importance of the moment, the fact that it feels like we're living through such meaningful history. That is, number one, just a motivating factor for some people. But what I'll say is that about 4 weeks ago, we had our ICC National Leadership Summit in Washington, D.C. And to look around this room, there were 715 undergraduates. There were over 400 on a wait list who wanted to be there, who wanted to be a part of this movement. And I just kept looking around that room and thinking to myself, if on October 7th, Qatar and Hamas wanted to erode our confidence, if they wanted to weaken our movement, looking around this room is proof that they've failed, and that our movement is fundamentally strong. They have awakened a sleeping giant. And that's why I'm optimistic about our ability to successfully defeat the professional anti-Semitism that our adversaries are bringing to the campuses, and to be very deliberate and hopeful about building a new generation of bipartisan pro-Israel leaders for America.
All right, well, that is a really nice and upbeat way to end this conversation. I want to thank you, Jacob Bame from ICC, for joining us today on the FDD Morning.
Thanks, Jonathan. Take care.
All right. Interesting stuff. Pretty granular there, too. Here's what FDD has on tap for you today. FDD's Mark Montgomery and Annie Fixler published an insight on our website outlining 5 tasks for the new National Cyber Director. In case you missed it, the Senate confirmed Sean Cairncross as the Chief of U.S. Cyber Policymaking on August 2nd. Annie and Mark offer Cairncross a blueprint to make sure his crucial mission succeeds. My colleague Ari Ben-Am is out with an important research memo highlighting Iranian influence operations against Israel since October 7th. Ari warns that the pace and volume of these operations make it truly difficult to address them in a timely manner, but all hope is not lost. Ari offers 4 suggestions for how the U.S. can degrade Iran's ability to conduct influence operations in the first place. And yes, these lessons apply to our other adversaries as well. Finally, check out my colleague Natalie Econo's piece in FDD's Long War Journal about Qatar's growing footprint in Africa. This summer, our least favorite major non-NATO ally pledged $270 billion to 6 African countries while mediating talks between the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Rwanda-backed M23 rebel group. Investments and diplomacy to promote stability while stoking instability next door. That's the playbook the Qataris use. Look how well that's turned out in the Middle East. All right. No offense to the other cutlery in my drawer, but we're going to stick a fork in this episode of the FDD Morning Brief. If you're itching for more enlightenment, check out the expert analysis on our website, fdd.org, read our quick takes on X, or watch the videos we post on Instagram and YouTube. And it's never too late to make that thoughtful, tax-deductible donation at fdd.org/invest. The FDD Morning Brief team is off for the long weekend. Well deserved, guys. So no episode on Monday morning, but I'll be back on Wednesday, September 3rd. Our guest will be Jacob Katz, author of a new book on the failures in Israel that led to the war in Gaza. I read it, and it's good. Really good, actually. Until then, I'm Jonathan Schanzer, signing off for FDD.